The mind is not based on you. It's an amalgamation of a whole different thing, a whole bunch of things.
Who?
People.
Personally, writing about my own experiences and my battles with addiction as a teenager becomes therapeutic in a way.
The Emmy for lead actress in a drama series.
People think that fiction is a lie, but I think it has to be a very honest lie. Fiction demands honesty.
How much of you is in this?
There's a lot of me in it. There's a lot of my personality and what I like and my experiences.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who has shared their story with me. I want you to know that anyone who has loved a Rue or feels like they are a Rue, I want you to know that I'm so grateful for your stories, and I carry them with me, and I carry them with her. So thank you so much.
Self-insertion is a device in which the author writes themselves into their story, under the guise of, or from the perspective of, a fictional character. The character, overtly or otherwise, behaves like, has a personality of, and may even be described as physically resembling the author of the work. This can be done intentionally or not, and it can add a personal touch to the narrative.
Stephen said it's about his childhood, how he grew up and his memories of his parents and his sisters.
Think of characters like the new Velma, looking suspiciously similar to her voice actress and the executive producer of the show, Mindy Kaling. Or how writer, director, producer, star Tommy Wiseau's character Johnny in The Room is based on him, and the story is based on his experiences after moving to America.
I did not hit her. It's not true. I did not hit her. I did not.
But self-inserts aren't a new thing. They're not limited to cinema either. From how the 1959 French classic The 400 Blows is semi-autobiographical and based on director Francois Truffaut's childhood, or how the main character Robert Langdon in Dan Brown's famous book series is meant to be the author's idealized version of himself, the man he wishes he could be. They were both born on the same day, in the same city, and attended the same school. But beyond that, Langdon's traits are mixed with those of other figures, which blurs where Brown's begin and end. Or consider a stranger example in Stephen King's Dark Tower series, where King himself appears as a central supporting character. Firstly, in the 5th book, Wolves of the Calla, the protagonist Roland Deschain comes across a copy of King's novel, Salem's Lot, after having met Father Callahan, a character from that same novel. In the 6th book, Song of Susanna, Roland meets King in person, canonically at a time when King hadn't written any other Dark Tower books beyond the first one. When Roland hypnotizes him, it's revealed that King isn't actually the creator of Roland or the other Dark Tower characters, but simply a channel for Gan, the spirit of the Dark Tower itself, that allows the author to record and chronicle Roland's quest as novels. That's not all though, because the main antagonist, the Crimson King, I guess there can only be one king, wants King dead, and tried to kill him as a child. King's fear of him prevented him from writing any more Dark Tower books, and Roland convinces him to continue. But soon, the Crimson King tries to kill Stephen again, this time in a fictionalized version of the real car accident that almost killed him in 1999, where he portrays the real-life driver as an unwitting servant of the Crimson King. This last example also shows that self-inserts don't have to be the lead. I mean, look at every Stan Lee Marvel cameo.
Don't speak on the family, Crody. You can get deep in the family, Crody. Talk about me and my family, Crody. Someone go bleed in your family, Crody.
Oh, also while I'm talking about Marvel and weird metafictional crossovers between reality and fiction, this is a real panel from the 12th issue of the Deadpool Spider-Man comic book, where Deadpool gives Captain Marvel a DVD of Tommy Wiseau's The Room, and since this comic came out shortly after Brie Larson was announced to be playing her in the MCU in the near future, she complains that she actually wanted Room, the movie that Brie Larson stars in and won an Oscar for, and tells him that Tommy is an alien who the Guardians of the Galaxy have been pursuing for years.
What?
You're just a chicken. Chip, 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 chip.
That's not even the weirdest thing Marvel has done. I mean, they hated the 2015 Fantastic Four movie so much, they killed the live-action cast in an explosion before canceling their comic series. Anyway, Speaking of Johnny, a character who's seemingly sinless among characters who are endlessly flawed, it reveals one of the major issues people claim many self-insert characters can have: being a Mary Sue.
This hyperdrive blows are going to be pieces of us in 3 different systems. What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
Huh?
A Mary Sue is a character archetype in fiction, usually a young woman, who is often portrayed as inexplicably competent across all domains, gifted with unique talents or powers, liked or respected by most other characters, unrealistically free of weaknesses, extremely attractive, innately virtuous, and generally lacking any meaningful character flaws, and almost always the main character. A Mary Sue is often an author's idealized self-insertion and may serve as a form of wish fulfillment. M. Night Shyamalan is not particularly known for making really personal films, but his widely unknown debut feature, Praying with Anger, is as personal as it gets. Born in Mahe, India, Shyamalan only spent 6 weeks there before moving to Pennsylvania in the United States. Praying with Anger follows an alienated, Americanized teenager, played by M. Night in his only starring role in his films to date, of East Indian heritage being sent back to India, where he discovers his roots. M. Night shot the film at 21 years old, while still a student at NYU, with borrowed money from friends and family. And while it was never given a wide release, it remains his most explicitly personal film. Fast forwarding his career, his third film, The Sixth Sense, shot him into superstardom, becoming the second highest grossing horror film of all time and nabbing 6 Oscar nominations. His following films remained critically and commercially successful until cracks started to show during the production of his 2006 film, Lady in the Water. In Michael Bamberger's book, The Man Who Heard Voices, or How M. Night Shyamalan Risked His Career on a Fairy Tale, a book about the production of the film, Bamberger outlines how the film was originally set to be produced by Touchstone Pictures, a production company owned by Disney, as his previous 4 films had been. But Nina Jacobson, Disney's executive at the time, told Shyamalan that they didn't understand the story and wanted to develop the script further. Angry about the response, Shyamalan claimed that Disney, quote, no longer valued individualism and wanted a hack instead of a director. And so he proceeded to take the story to Warner Brothers, despite the fact that Disney told him they would still fully fund the film regardless. The plot of the film follows a superintendent of an apartment complex who discovers a water nymph, or Narf, named Story, who has come to find the writer, a vessel who will be awakened when he meets her, and then write a book that will save humanity in the future. So who did M. Night Shyamalan cast to play this writer, you ask? This casting was one of the most negatively reviewed aspects of the film. It was perceived as a form of self-indulgence. You know, instead of having a minor cameo unlike most of his other films, he gives himself a central role in this film as a messianic character.
Do you wish to know your future? A boy in the Midwest of this land will grow up in a home where your book will be on the shelf and spoken of often. This boy will become leader of this country and begin a movement of great change. He will speak of you and your words. Your book will be the seeds of many of his great thoughts. It will be the seeds of change.
A metaphor for the risk, bravery, and sacrifice in storytelling, M. Night's character Vic Rand grapples with the nature of how his world-changing book will inspire the future leader, and privately asks Story to confirm his suspicion.
Story, I wanted to ask you, is something gonna happen to me? Someone gonna kill me because I write this?
But it gets even more complicated, because the film also includes a film critic character who's depicted as pompous and stubborn, and because he misadvises the other characters, he eventually meets a violent death.
I believe there was a little attack at a film critic in the movie here, was there not?
Well, I'm trying to think back on it, the story. It was interesting because the movie is about storytelling. It's about how people relate to stories, the lost art of stories, and how we listen to them. And I knew that it needed to be a character that was an expert and stories, and that he would stop learning. Whereas Paul's character was willing to learn and listen like a child and believe in things. This guy didn't believe in anything.
And thinking back from what you just said now, I think that was also a little saying that my movies are not like other Hollywood movies. I think they have.
Of all the films in Shyamalan's career to date, Lady in the Water is the worst performing, garnering scathing reviews and grossing only $73 million on a budget of $70 million. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter 17 years after its release, he said that it's his most misunderstood film, saying, "Lady in the Water was very close to who I am as a person. One thing I let go of on that movie was the idea of how will they sell the movie. The marketeers are the first people to tell your story. They begin the story. And that's part of the art form. So you have to start thinking about that as you're making the movie. And on Lady, I didn't do that. I just made something that I loved. It was the least seen of all my movies, but to this day, when people come up to me about that movie, they speak with religion about it." But speaking of film that uses a self-insert character to air the writer-director's grievances about criticism, look no further than Sam Levinson's 2021 chamber piece, Malcolm and Marie.
I thought of this moment in my own life in which I happened to not thank Ash at a premiere. And I thought, well, what a great jumping off point for two people to just completely unpack and air all of their grievances and resentments and feelings about, film and love and whether or not they're going to stay together. I will mention that when I forgot to thank Ash, we did not have this. No.
This film follows Malcolm, a filmmaker who forgets to acknowledge his girlfriend during the premiere of his film, and the ensuing tests to their relationship that follow when they return home. While the film received a mixed reception, particular attention was paid to a sequence in which Malcolm reads the first review of his film from
the white woman from the LA Times. I'm going to be part of the larger conversation about filmmaking without always having some white-ass writer making it about race. Normally, I wish death upon someone like this, someone who lacks the imagination like this. But instead, I'm gonna pray hard the way my mama taught me, that she gets carpal tunnel until her hands atrophy and cramp and she can no longer write nonsensical garbage like this anymore.
So this is what happens when you get a good review.
Despite the fact that her review is positive, Malcolm is incensed by the white critic's political interpretation of his film, which he feels is only being done because he's a black filmmaker.
If I decide to make a Lego movie, it's not because I want to tell a story about how the building blocks of the American empire was slave labor. I may just want to make a Lego movie.
The choice of this monologue being about a white lady from the LA Times doesn't appear to be a mistake, as many people believe that this is a pointed reference to a negative review he received from the LA Times for his sophomore thriller film Assassination Nation by a white female reviewer named Katie Walsh, who similarly focused on identity in her review, writing, quote, "The filmmakers have the gall to spend nearly 2 hours assaulting the audience with sexualized violence, only to turn around and offer up a patronizing lecture on the contradictory social conditioning of women as some kind of girl power rallying cry." The fact that a white filmmaker, who many believed was frustrated with the many criticisms of his use of the male gaze, was channeling his anger through the black character of Malcolm, whose issues with identity politics may seem more sympathetic to audiences, rubbed many people the wrong way. While it's true that many diverse voices are minimized and exploited in filmmaking, it's important to note that both Zendaya and John David Washington have stated that the creation of the film was a very collaborative process, as they also served as producers on the project.
A real thing that I think a lot of black creatives and filmmakers have the issue with is us kind of having to be this idea of being boxed in or having to create a certain kind of thing.
In an interview with the LA Times about the polarized response to the film, Levinson expressed his surprise at the fixation on the critic character, because Marie breaks Malcolm down and says that the critic's issue with him is the issue that she has with him as a human being. So I was surprised when a bit of the response has mirrored the ego of Malcolm, negating everything Marie has to say. Furthermore, despite the obvious parallels between Malcolm and Sam, it's not entirely true to call Malcolm Sam's self-insert. Sam Levinson suffered from drug addiction until he got clean at the age of 19. Marie gets clean at 20, with Marie being played by his Euphoria star Zendaya, who in the show portrays a drug-addicted teenager whom Levinson has stated was based on his experiences at that age.
This show can't be written by anyone else because it's so personal.
I feel like I'm watching a version of myself navigating the world at a young age, and I'm looking at it from almost a parental perspective.
I have this idea that basically all the characters are just like different facets of your personality.
On many levels.
Unlike films like Marriage Story, Her, or Lost in Translation, where the directors drew from their personal experiences of separation from their publicly known partners, this movie stands out because it can be seen as a candid, self-reflective exploration, almost like a messy therapy session, where two aspects of the same individual are in dialogue. According to Levinson, there are two ways to look at the story. It's either a celebration of the artist's ego or an evisceration of the artist's ego. The last movie we'll be talking about is by the most critically acclaimed filmmaker of this video, but this film was considered self-indulgent. Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths by Alejandro González Iñárritu. The first director in 64 years to win 2 consecutive Oscars for Best Director for the revered films Birdman and The Revenant. His next film was widely anticipated and expected to be a major awards contender, but ended up garnering a polarizing reception upon release. So why? The story follows a famous journalist turned documentarian who has just won a major international award, returning to his native country of Mexico, and begins having an existential crisis in the form of dreamlike visions. The film is the first of Iñárritu's to be fully filmed in Mexico since Amores Perros in 2000, and is a semi-autobiographical reflection on Iñárritu's feelings of conflict, being a filmmaker in Hollywood and leaving his home country behind for 2 decades.
Because I think what I tried to do, at least in Bardo, was that to have the courage to go into my personal emotional baggage and share it. And I think the more personal you are, the more universal you become.
With the reflection on the filmmaker's own psyche, the film has drawn comparisons to another metafictional semi-autobiographical film, Federico Fellini's 8½. Liberally utilizing dream sequences, surreal imagery, and coming in at 2.5 hours, the film was criticized for being self-indulgent and pretentious. In an interesting scene that preempts criticism like the last 2 movies we've analyzed, one of Silverio's former colleagues criticizes the documentary project he's working on as being too long, self-indulgent, and pretentious. The same criticisms directed at the film itself, and in response to them, Iñárritu states that the film is not self-referential. This is not narcissistic. It's not me. But I want somebody to explain why I don't have the right to talk about something that is very important for me and my family. If I maybe was from Denmark, or if I was Swedish, I would be a philosopher. That's the heart of the conflict of the character, this identity politics. You can like it or not, that's not the discussion. But there's a kind of racist undercurrent where because I'm Mexican, I'm pretentious.
When the film is reduced to a tomato thing, then we are done. That's the thing. Art doesn't work that way, you know?
And on that note, that concludes the first half of this analysis of self-insertion in cinema. And in a few weeks, we'll be taking a look at acclaimed films that use the technique. So be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss it.